Okay, well, we'll go ahead and get started. If anyone else comes in, we'll let them in. But welcome. Thank you for joining us for this workshop, this Cooking with the Seasons. We're going to be talking about winter. And yeah, I just want to introduce the organization. Allegheny Mountain Institute is an educational nonprofit working to cultivate healthy communities through food and education. We strive to meet our mission through a three-pronged approach, which includes an 18-month tuition-free farm and food system fellowship, institutional support for schools and hospitals, through integrating farming, nutritious food, and related education, and regional networking to build a food system that nourishes our body, our environment, and our economy. And I'll just introduce myself. I'm Sarah Spinner. I am a community fellow, and yeah, I'll be hosting this workshop. I do want to remind you that this is going to be recorded and posted on our YouTube page. So if you don't want to be recorded, you can go ahead and turn off your video. Also, everyone is currently on mute. So if you have any questions or comments, go ahead and put them in the chat. We have another community fellow, Jamie, right with us, and she is going to be moderating that chat and letting people in. So feel free to use that chat. And if there's any questions at the end as well, just about anything we're going over, you can ask them then as well. Yeah, and so I'm currently in the kitchen at our campus at the Allegheny Mountain Farm, where the first part of the fellowship, this is where the fellows will live and work. So I'm excited to be back in this kitchen after not being in it for a while. So let's go ahead and get started. Yeah, we're talking about eating seasonally and like why is it important? So eating seasonally is sometimes also kind of thought synonymously with eating locally, which isn't always the case. Although that is ideal, it's always great to eat locally as well, support your local food systems, but eating seasonally really is just eating the vegetables or any of the produce when they're growing in the most ideal conditions. So they're gonna be healthier, and healthier crops are gonna lead to more nutritious, or what we like to call nutrient density. So higher nutrient density in the actual produce. So great on all ends, and also things that are locally and seasonally perfect. That is the goal. And then, so what we're gonna be going over today is we're doing a 3-course meal. Should be super easy, super adaptable to whatever also ingredients you have. Those are good ideas, but you know, whatever you have, you can adapt as well. So we're gonna start with a beet and arugula and goat cheese crostinis. So, and then we're gonna move on to a celeriac and potato mash with some sautéed greens and mushrooms. And then lastly, we're gonna finish off with some broiled sweet grapefruit. And before we get into all of that, I just want to talk about the star players here, the winter produce. So starting off with beets, they are a great winter produce. They are actually pretty cool hardy, so they can handle some pretty cool temperatures, even some frosts. We have them currently growing and overwintering from being planted before winter in our high tunnel. So they're covered up, they're protected, especially in the zones that we're in. Still gets pretty cold, but you can still definitely grow them, just have them covered up. And like I said, that just depends on different zones. If you're warmer, you might not have to cover them up, but they actually do great in the winter because they'll get sweeter because more of the sugar is gonna be producing because they're growing a little slower. And they also contain a good source of fiber and other micronutrients, including iron, vitamin C, and antioxidants. So that's also great. And then moving on to arugula, which is everyone's favorite spicy greens. Well, some people don't like it, but I love arugula. And again, we have these growing in our high tunnel. Can definitely, I don't know, it's not often thought as, like greens aren't often thought as like a winter produce, but some of them definitely are. And it's good to get those greens in the winter. All times, greens are important. Yeah, and then celeriac, which is kind of an ugly thing. It's actually, NPR called it the ugly duckling of the vegetable world, and I don't know how closely I can get, but it is pretty ugly. I've cut this one in half, but you can tell it's not the prettiest thing, but we should not judge our vegetables on their looks because celeriac is great. It's full of nutrients and it's very versatile. And it's also not as starchy, even though I'm using it kind of alongside or in lieu of like a potato is a common thing to do, but it is not very starchy, so it's a great kind of more nutritious alternative. Also, I don't know if everyone's heard of celeriac before, but it is just the root of like a celery plant, but it's not necessarily the exact same plant as what we would get our celery stalks from. I don't know, I feel like most people like celery, but I actually hate celery. And I've actually really grown to enjoy celeriac, especially mixed in with potatoes like we're gonna be doing today. It really just has that kind of essence of this celery flavor, and also when you cook it, it gets a little more sweet. I actually have a great story about celeriac. So I had no idea what it was or that it even existed when I was up here during the first part of the fellowship last year. And I actually one day I had planned, it wasn't even my day to be cooking, but I planned on making baked apples for everyone. So I went into the freezer where we have our apples from the previous year to preserve them, and I found this bag. I assumed it was just like, oh, maybe it's green apples, maybe they're peeled, and it's just, you know, I didn't even read the label. I just assumed, which is always a bad thing to do. And I started defrosting them on a cast iron skillet, and I still, even after like 5 minutes, had no idea the mistake I had made until someone else walked into the kitchen and was like, who's using celeriac? And I was like, oh, those aren't apples? Because I couldn't tell, they're still frozen, and I just wasn't paying enough attention. They are very different things, and they look different. But yeah, and that's how I found out what celeriac was, and I had to use it because I couldn't let it go to waste, and I actually ended up turning it into a mash. And so that was my first experience with celeriac. Quite embarrassing one, but everyone was also really surprised when I presented it as part of the meal, because everyone knows that I don't like celery, because I've told everyone not to cook with celery for me. But again, it kind of just takes on the essence of celery and isn't as bold of a flavor as celery. If you don't like celery, you'll probably still like celeriac, especially mixed in with potatoes like we're doing. But yeah, moving on, we're going to talk about mushrooms next. So luckily, I'm actually currently having the experience where I am kind of implementing a mushroom production at our farm at Augusta Health. So I'm learning all about how to grow and how great and how fun these fungi are. But besides just being fun, they are really nutritious and a great substitute for meals, especially if you're vegan or vegetarian. They are often used as like a meat replacement. But in this case, they're just an integral part of the meal. But you can also, and I'll talk about this when we go to that part, but you can also add sausage or any kind of meat to this meal as well. So it doesn't have to be a substitute, but yeah, they're great. So we're gonna be using oyster mushrooms today, and I'll show you what those look like. They have little like gills on the back, and they can just be grown out of a bucket and inside. So even though when you think of mushrooms, and they do like to grow ideally in like warm, humid kind of environments, they do great in winter climates. Especially what we're gonna be doing is fruiting them inside of buckets in our greenhouse. It's being maintained, and they just do pretty well in the winter climates, because sometimes they get too hot or even like too wet. It can be bad for them in the summer. And also, they're packed full of nutrients. They're a good source of protein and fiber, and actually vitamin D. Well, vitamin D is typically, you can only really get it from the sun. It has very few natural food sources, but when grown under UV lights, or when fruited under UV lights, oyster mushrooms are like one of the greatest sources, like food sources of vitamin D, which is a great addition to a winter diet, considering we probably aren't getting that much sun. If it's anywhere like here, we're not going outside that often, and it's gray and covered in snow. So that's a great addition. And then lastly, we're gonna be working with grapefruit, and that's not necessarily local, but it is like all citrus fruits are really harvested in the winter, especially in the warmer climates like Florida or Texas. And it is important to note that, you know, there are inherent environmental impacts with, you know, food miles and how this grapefruit has traveled to get here, but it is readily available in grocery stores, and it's still a great addition to your diet. You know, but I did want to acknowledge that it's not local. And I think when we all think of vitamin C, we think of citrus, and that's the same with grapefruit. Great vitamin C, also vitamin A and other antioxidants. So just a great fruit. I am like a grapefruit, but grapefruit. I've been on a big grapefruit kick lately. I love them. And now we're just gonna get started. So we're gonna start with our crostinis. So I've already pre-roasted the beets, but I can also show what I did. I keep the skins on the beets, but you can also skin them if you'd like. Just depends. I've already washed these, and I just diced them up really small, and that's so they fit better on the crostini, and also they just roast faster. And what I did is I roasted them at 425 for about 25 minutes, and that can depend on your oven. Obviously, keep an eye on them. And also, usually when you're roasting something with the oven that high, you want to use, you don't really want to use olive oil. You want to use an oil that has like a higher burning point temperature. Unfortunately, all I have is olive oil here, so that's what I'm about to use, but it is ideal to use like an avocado oil or even just like a vegetable oil that does better at a higher temperature. So just show, I don't know how easy it is. Can you see what I'm doing? Okay, just want to make sure it's visible to you guys. So just a really small dice, just like that. And it'll make your fingers look like you've been in surgery, but that's okay. And then you'll just mix them with some olive oil and then throw them in the oven. And so I already have them prepped right here just for the sake of time. I'll just put those to the side, but again, small dice, just better for this, but also makes them cook a lot faster. I'm just gonna wipe some of that off my hands if I can. They might be stained, but that's all right. So what we're gonna do first is we're gonna take our goat cheese and you know, if there's dietary restrictions, if you're vegan or whatever, a great alternative that kind of still, you know, utilizes beets is making a beet hummus. Super easy to make, and it's a beautiful color, and I honestly think it tastes better than regular hummus. We're just gonna take the goat cheese, and I kind of set the goat cheese out just like 20, 30 minutes beforehand so it's more spreadable. I'm just gonna spread that right on. Just make 2 of them so we can enjoy them later. And then just lay your arugula down on top of it. However much you like. You can also rip it up, just depending, really. It doesn't matter. There's no science to the cooking we're doing today at all, which I think makes it more fun. And then we're just gonna sprinkle our beets on. We can make sure some of them are gonna fall off. Oh, they're all falling off. They will not stay on. Well, try to get them to stay on. That's the goal. Maybe I'll use less on this one. And also with roasting these, you want to make them just so they're like soft and tender and not to the point where they're like crunchy, but they'll still taste good either way. Some of mine are a little crunchy because they're smaller, but just keep that in mind. And then we're gonna drizzle with honey. This is honey from our bees here. And honey's great. This is from 2018. It does not go bad at all. And I love that about honey. But these are from our bees. If I can get it open. I opened it earlier. I know I can. Oh no. Oh, I got it. Gotta make sure the honey doesn't get on the rim or I'll never get it open again. And this honey isn't as like liquidy as other ones, so I'm just gonna take like both the spoons to kind of get it on top of there. If I can. It's not going well, I'll say that, but maybe put the honey on first, that'll work better. Or if you have, maybe if you heat the honey up, that might be good as well. But that's the idea. Also, this honey's a little different because it's like, I don't know, not as liquidy. I don't know how to describe it.
Not as viscous.
Yeah, it's more viscous.
Less viscous.
Oh, less viscous. But those are the crostinis, and we're just gonna set those aside. And also, it might be good if you like mix the honey into the goat cheese and kind of like whisk that up together beforehand. Just thought of that. Might be good. I'm just gonna set those aside until we move on.
Sarah, there was also an idea to put the beets on top of the cheese to hold them in place.
Oh, that is a very good idea. Kind of like embed the beets into the cheese. Great idea. Should have trial ran this before. I did on most of it, but this one seems so simple, but nothing's ever as simple as it looks. So moving on, also wanted to note that we will be using the beet greens. So to save those, with a lot of things, it's always good to kind of use the whole plant when you can. Obviously some things you don't want to eat the greens on, but with beets, beet greens are a great addition to anything, and they don't really have that strong of a taste, really. I mean, you could use any winter green like a spinach or a kale, but we have these because we were using beets, so that's what we're going to use. But moving on to our celeriac and potato mash. So to prep the celeriac, I'm just going to show that real quick, and then we'll get started with the mushroom prep and the greens. I'll show you how to cook those. I did this will take a while to cook, so I pre-made some of it, and I'll introduce that in a minute. But with the celeriac, obviously you don't want all those crazy bits. So, and again, I already cut this one in half, but you just want to take off the top and bottom. And so with this celeriac, we had it growing, I don't know, probably harvested in like October. And we have had it stored in our root cellar. So they store really well, so they're a great addition to your kitchen. They'll last pretty long. Or if you're growing them in your garden or want to start growing them in your garden, they also great storing. So, and then you just want to get the skin off, the outer layer. So I'm just going to do that by going like this. It's a little hard. I would say it's kind of like cutting into like a sweet potato, that kind of level of hardness, but so just be careful when you're doing this part. Just get all that off. Making the whole table shake. Push that off to the side. Move that over so y'all can see what I'm doing. Just make a scraps pile. Oh, there was a little worm. Delicious. No way he's still alive. I did rinse this beforehand, but had a lot of little nooks and crannies. So I'm gonna rinse this off real quick, just because when cutting it, that dirt just kind of stayed on, but. And then to cut it, again, it's kind of hard, but it's not impossible to cut. Just gonna need a lot of pressure. So kind of cut it into like thick slices, and then we're gonna make it into kind of like matchsticks. We're just trying to get a nice like cube on it. Again, kind of small just because it'll decrease the cooking time. So we'll just cube those up. And I don't need to show doing all of it because I do have it pre-prepped, but you'll just put this into some water, bring it to a boil, and let it simmer for about 15 minutes. Might be longer if your chunks are a little bigger. And we are doing these with potatoes, and these are also potatoes from our garden. So that's always great. I leave the skins on. I like the skins, and it adds some more fiber, but you obviously don't have to if you don't like to. And again, you just want to get that similar size. So yeah, try to keep consistent with the size just for cooking, but not a huge deal. And what I love most about working with recipes like this is there really isn't a recipe. You know, we're making this mash. You can make it just like you would make your mashed potatoes that you normally make. So again, it's great because it's not a big science to it. But now that I've cut these, I will make them for later. So I have some water back here, so we'll get those on a simmer, but we don't have to wait for those. And then to go ahead and get started on the mushrooms and the greens, I'll show those, and then while those are cooking, I'll go back to the mash and what the next steps are for those. So working with the oyster mushrooms, they are really cool if you haven't seen how they grow. They'll kind of grow, I kind of already pulled them apart, but they'll kind of grow on top of each other, kind of out of the same area. But you do want to get those kind of more fibrous stems off. And you can use any mushroom also, or a variety of mushrooms. This is just what we had also locally from Othello Acres, and Othello Acres in Stanton. So if you're not from the area, I would definitely check out, just see, you know, just do your research, see if there's any local mushroom producers in your area, or even look into starting like growing your own in your house. It's really easy, and it's not too hard to mess up. But and we just want to chop these in kind of a similar size. I'm doing them kind of small, but you can, again, it does not matter at all. And oyster mushrooms can also be really pretty. I'm not exactly sure what varieties these are, but they come in blue, and they're kind of like a light blue, and my favorite are pink oyster mushrooms. They are absolutely beautiful. They look like flowers, and they are favorite pink. And pink's my favorite color, so I gravitate towards those. And I'm really excited to hopefully be growing some of those this year at the farm. So I'm just gonna go ahead and get these two skillets ready. They have butter in them. Obviously, you know, if you don't want to use butter, you can use oil or like a plant-based butter. Now I'm just going to turn for the mushrooms on medium-high heat. And I'm just going to let that butter melt down a little bit. Push these to the side. And then for the beet greens, I'm going to do that in a separate one on like medium heat. And so the goal here for the mushrooms, we're kind of get them a little crispy, add like kind of that crispiness level to the mash. And I think that just, I don't know, they taste better that way in my opinion, because, you know, mushrooms, they kind of have an interesting texture. So I'll just get those heated up. So the butter will start heating up, and move these over. The butter's already starting to melt. And with these mushrooms, since we do want them to be kind of crispy, I'm gonna kind of place them a little far apart from each other, because we're also going to be flipping them halfway through. Spread that butter around. Might need to add more butter as we go. And then for the greens, so I already washed these. Also, like check your greens out. Some of them might not be, you know, in the best shape, but luckily most of these looked pretty good. Also, you'll notice if you buy beets or get them locally, however you get your beets, when they're storing them, sometimes the greens will start to wilt faster. So just keep that in mind. You might want to cut the greens off and store them separately if needed. So I'm just trimming off the bottoms, but you can still eat the stems, so I'm still leaving some of it on. I'm just giving it like a nice rough chop. Again, super easy, no science to it. Then we're gonna throw those in. And for the mushrooms, they've already started heating up and starting to cook. We're just gonna kind of cook those on each side for about 3 to 5 minutes, just depending on how they're looking. When they start cooking down some more, I'll also season them with like some salt, pepper, and some garlic, which I already had pre-minced. And I'm also gonna put some red pepper flakes on them, but not necessary. You can also do whatever seasoning you like. Just, you know, keep the flavors consistent throughout the greens, the mushrooms, and whatever you're gonna put in your mash. So while those are cooking, I gotta make sure I keep an eye on them. Maybe I should got my timer here. Just put it on 2 minutes as I've already started. And with the greens, the goal for them is just kind of cook them down. They're gonna obviously shrink a lot with any greens. and kind of get them like just wilted. That will probably take like 5 to 8 minutes, not very long. So while those are getting going, we're gonna get back to our mash. So I already had these ones already boiled and drained and mashed up a bit, but you're just gonna add some milk, and again, you don't have to use dairy milk, you can use plant-based milk and butter. Again, I'm just kind of eyeballing this because we're just gonna try and get it to whatever consistency we want, or you can use whatever your favorite mashed potato recipe is and just substitute some or substitute fully with celeriac. And once I kind of get this in here and mash it up, so I'm gonna put it back on the burner and kind of heat it back up to get it incorporated better. But just wanted you guys to be able to see what I'm doing. Hopefully the angle's good. And here I have about 1/4 cup of milk. I probably will not use this all again. I'm just gonna kind of see what I need. I'm gonna guess I probably only need like 1/8 cup of milk. So I'll just put a little bit in and put this back on the burner and keep an eye on it and kind of incorporate it all together. And then we can see what it looks like when it's done. And again, seasoning with salt, pepper, and also rosemary and maybe the red pepper flakes. So we're just gonna reheat those. Already there. Now, and these little bits. And I am gonna add a tiny bit more butter. The timer's about to go off, so I'm gonna turn it off so we don't hear it. And I'm just using tongs to flip them over, so that way I can see how each of them are doing. This is where it comes in handy to kind of have them all the same size, so that way some of them are getting crispier than others, but they'll be great either way. So I'm gonna flip those over, give them about 3 more minutes, maybe less. We'll see how they look. Set that aside. We'll give our greens a stir. You kind of want to periodically mix them up. We don't want them getting burnt or crispy because our goal here is just to wilt them and cook them down. And I didn't use a lot just for the sake of the demonstration, but obviously when cooking with greens, go overboard because they will cook down a lot. We'll check on how the mash is doing. So it looks like we need a little bit more milk, and I'll show you what that looks like once I add some more of that milk so you can see what consistency I'm going for. Yeah, as those are cooking, see how they're looking. You don't have to make them crispy. I just think that's a great, texture for the palate when you're eating the mash, just so it's not all soft. But however you prefer your mushrooms, and depending on, what mushroom you're using. And while we're waiting, I'm just going to talk about storing mushrooms and cleaning mushrooms. So these are most likely grown inside. They're probably, they don't have any dirt on them, weren't dirty. But if you're getting mushrooms from the grocery store, you might want to kind of get some of the dirt off of them. And you don't want to rinse them with water necessarily. You want to get a damp paper towel or a damp rag and just kind of lightly brush them off, wipe them off. And that should do it for that. You don't necessarily have to wash them either. And then also with storing mushrooms, you want to keep them in either the container they came in if you got them from a store, or in a brown paper bag and just in the fridge. I think some mushrooms you don't have to refrigerate, but most you do. And they'll probably keep for about a week in the fridge, but keep an eye on them. They can get kind of slimy. So I like to just err on the side of caution and buy them right when I know I'm going to be using them soon. I'm going to go ahead and turn the mushrooms off. And I wish I could somehow show it. Yeah, I'm going to try and pick it up. These cast irons get hot, so I definitely don't want to burn myself. But you can kind of see it cut in kind of small part, and they also kind of shrunk a lot, so also keep that in mind. So while those are still kind of warm, but it's not still on, I am going to season them. So we have some salt. And while I'm here, I'll go ahead and salt the greens. Also, I'm going to add some garlic to the greens. You can add it anywhere as long as it's just, you know, depending on how much garlic you like. I tend to like a lot of garlic, so I'm going to put garlic in the mash and in one of the things that it's going to be topped with. But since the greens are still cooking, we'll go with those. And with garlic, you definitely don't want to burn it, so I always kind of put it in near the end, and you just really want to do it till it's like fragrant, because once it gets burnt, it just tastes really bitter. And it's pretty easy to burn it, as I have experienced before. So a little bit of black pepper, both. I am going to add a little chili flakes. I love them. It doesn't matter where you add it to or how much. So I really like cooking. Sometimes it can be really fun with it. Baking's a little different, more of a science to it, and that's why I'm not as good with baking as I am with cooking. Because you can more easily mess it up. But we'll check out how the mash is looking. I'll pull that closer so we can see. Sure to turn the burner off. Very important. I'm just gonna mash that up. Might still need to add some more milk or butter. Again, just going with the consistency you want. There's no right or wrong, or like I said, if you have your favorite mashed potato recipe already, base it off that. And I'm just using a potato masher. You could probably also, depending on how like thick you might want, you can also probably use an immersion blender. Would be great to get a really creamy potato. And I'm just going to show you guys, if you can see how it's looking now. And I think I might need to add a little more butter. I don't know if you'll be able to see it. Let me see. Can you tell? Awesome. I cannot forget about my greens, so I'm going to turn those off. And give them a stir. So it started to wilt. Unfortunately, one did get a little crispy because I got distracted, but ideally, when I'm cooking, I'm not usually talking to a lot of people, so hopefully I don't get distracted. But back to the mash, we are starting to get really creamy once I keep going with it. Tiny bit more milk, and then season it up. And make sure to kind of taste as you go. I think that's a great way to see how the seasoning's going, or if it needs anything. I tend to underspice things, so it's always good also to have someone else nearby if you want their opinion, which I really enjoy during the first part of the fellowship, having everyone there to be like, does this taste good? What does it need? And I honestly got to learn so much more about cooking from everyone else here, and I'm so grateful for that, because I honestly think I'm a lot better cook now. Still need some improvement, I'm sure, but definitely better than a year ago. Again, you can really add just whatever seasonings you want. I tend to always go for rosemary whenever I'm doing anything with potatoes, but that's just my comfort level, I think. And again, with the skins, they're still in here, but if you peel them, they won't be in there. It's really just your preference. Let's see if I can put this in a bowl and show you guys what it looks like. Sticks. Don't worry, none of this will be going to waste. We'll all be eating it for dinner tonight. So So this is kind of what it's looking like now. It's a little thicker, and that's kind of how I prefer it, but again, just add as much melting butter as you want. I'm gonna get those mushrooms right on top. And the greens. It's definitely get better with my plating techniques. It doesn't look as pretty as I thought it would, but I'm sure it'll taste great, even if it's not the prettiest thing ever. So I'll show you that. Again, it looks prettier in my head, but that's okay too.
Delicious.
It'll be good either way. So I'll put that off to the side and we'll get to the grapefruit. First thing I need to do is turn my oven on and get that heated up. So we're gonna be broiling them, and our ovens don't have a broiler, so I'm just gonna turn them up to 500. And they might take a little bit longer doing it that way, but if you do have a broiler, that's perfect. I'm gonna grab our grapefruit, and I'm gonna just wipe off my knife so it doesn't have celeriac or any other flavors on it that might get into the grapefruit. So we're just gonna cut it in half. And so we're gonna be sitting them face up. This one already is kind of a little flat on the bottom, but just so to kind of flatten it out, I just like to give it a straight edge on the bottom. So that way they'll sit better in the pan. And also what I like to do with just eating grapefruits in general, and it works out well for this too, is go ahead and cut around the edge and around the little membrane, so that way it's a lot easier to spoon out when you go to eat it. So I'm just gonna go ahead and quickly do that. It can get a little tedious when you're going through all the little sections, but it'll be worth it, so you don't leave any of the fruit behind. This one is very juicy. I always hate when I'm cutting fruit and so much of the juice, I like lose so much of it. So I want it to stay in. Trying to do this quickly, but I need to make sure I'm doing it correctly. Okay, let me grab my pan over here. Yeah, and so when we're broiling these, it really kind of brings out their caramelization. And we're gonna take some brown sugar, really sweeten them up even more. I know sometimes people don't like grapefruit because it tends to be a little bitter or sour, but this really kind of takes that all away. And that's honestly mostly just like the membrane area and like the peel. New word I learned today. So that's really where all it comes from, but if you don't like how bitter it can taste, cooking it really brings out the natural sugars, and we're going to be adding brown sugar to it, so you can't go wrong there. So I'm just going to sprinkle the brown sugar on. Kind of cover it. It's kind of giving the same effect as if you were to brulee it, so if you have a torch and you feel comfortable using it, I would definitely just go that route. But this is just another alternative, and we don't have a torch, and it's probably better for me not to use it. Just get that sugar on there. And then also we got some melted butter. Did I forget to spoon? Yes, thank you. It's hard to realize all the things you need until you need them. Thank you. And then this will just kind of help you kind of get more caramelization and more like browning on top by adding the butter. don't need a lot. There's a lid on there. So if you're broiling them and not just using the oven on like 500 like we are, it should take about 3 to 5 minutes, and you really want to keep an eye on it because every broiler is different, and also it will burn very fast. But unfortunately, since we don't have one, it doesn't get as hot. It will take a little bit longer. But really what you're looking for is just kind of the browning effect, kind of like the hardening of the sugar on top. So I'm going to go ahead and put those in. And I'm just going to set a timer for 5 minutes just so I can keep an eye on it, but it will probably take longer. And then while we wait for those, does anyone have any questions so far, or anything you couldn't see well that you want me to explain better? Okay. We'll wait for those. And I guess while we wait for those, we can talk about some cookbook suggestions. I've really enjoyed using the 6 Seasons cookbook by Joshua McFadden. And that one's great because it's organized by season. So if you really want to start eating more seasonally, that's a great way to look at it. And it's also just a great cookbook. All the things I've had out of it have been amazing. And then also Dishing Up the Dirt. Also categorized seasonally. And a lot of those recipes you can also find on their website. And then I also have some other ones here that I can show. So Enchanted Broccoli Forest, also a good one. And Dining In. And a lot of these, except for this one, are more plant-based, and that's just kind of what I showcased today. But again, you can obviously add in whatever meat you want or substitute out anything for any other dietary restrictions. Yeah, I would probably recommend with the mash, probably like a local pork sausage, or just anything, maybe even like a Italian sausage, just depending on kind of the seasoning and the flavor profile you're going for. And yeah, I don't know what to fill this time with, but we're gonna wait for these grapefruits.
So we had a question about cutting boards.
Yes.
And whether we categorize them, use any specifically for meat or vegetables.
Yes. So here we don't really cook with a lot of meat. We do have chickens once we go through that process and butcher them, but in general, it is always good to have separate cutting boards. Obviously, I didn't showcase that great today, but we're also only working with already cleaned and just vegetables. But yes, you probably do want to do, I know a lot of like restaurants use like a color scheme, so they'll use a certain cutting board for raw chicken or raw red meat versus what they're going to put vegetables on. And also, I think it's pretty ideal not to do any raw meat or anything on a wooden cutting board because those contaminants will kind of get stuck in the grains of the cutting board. And also with like plastic cutting boards, something like that, some of them can be dishwasher safe, and that's a great way to sanitize them. So yes, great thought, good question. That is very important, especially when you're feeding other people, which during the fellowship we do. We feed up to 12 people sometimes, so it's really good for food safety.
I'll check on these.
Awesome. We're gonna get a check on the grapefruits. Yeah, it will. Yeah, it will go faster if you have it on broil. Another method you could do also is with one of these cast iron skillets. You do the same thing, but put it face down and into the cast iron. And then if that's not even going fast enough, you can do a combination of cast iron and oven. But again, if you do have the broiler setting, it'll go pretty fast.
So a few other things from the comments. Someone suggested that you have a bowl on the island to collect compost.
Yes, that is a great idea. We have a compost bucket. It's just on the other side of this table and not the prettiest thing to look at. So, but that would be nice to just go ahead and have it right here where I'm cooking with it. And also great for just like at home when you don't need a whole bucket. If you're not feeding a ton of people, to just go ahead and have just like an at-home little compost system is great.
Kristen wants to know if you have any ideas for pressure cooker use.
Oh.
She says beets are really quick and fast to do.
Oh, yeah. Me and pressure cookers don't always get along. I've had to use them with cooking, like dry beans. Even, you know, we pre-soak them, but still sometimes it takes long, or you don't always think ahead of time to pre-soak your beans. But yeah, pressure cookers can be great. I've never tried pressure cooked beets, but I assume it would be very fast. Also, something similar like an Instapot, I think, is a great adaptation to use with any cooking method. Yeah, with the mash, you can also probably do something similar like an Instapot. Yeah, pressure cookers can be kind of scary, so I kind of tend to stay away from at least the stovetop ones that can't just press a button.
I feel weird being off camera and talking to you guys. So John was interested in hearing if we had any ideas what type of flowers the bees who made this honey were foraging for, because it's such a light
Yes. Yeah, that's a great question. This honey was from 2018, so that's before any of us were here. So I don't really know, but I can assume like what's still around. Probably clover. Also, what's that? Black locust. Black locust trees. Yeah. Now it's really hard to find purely black locust honey, but that is kind of a little more common in this area, and it does produce more of a light color. So maybe the light color could be from that. But we also have been planting like pollinator gardens in the past. So like the bees will kind of get a variety of forages, but also, yeah, some people, depending on like what the goal is for their honey, they will kind of only have one thing kind of available to them. So that way more of those flavors, especially like clover honey is very common. More of those flavor profiles come out in the honey.
Awesome.
I'm gonna check on the
Go ahead. John says thank you.
Yes. Okay, so we're getting closer, but still not quite there. But again, the point is just kind of get the caramelization on top.
Great. We have one more question. So we want to talk about that. Kate is wondering about knives. How often do you sharpen them?
Yes.
How do you do it?
So, do we have a sharpener out? Yes.
There's that one. Or like a...
Yeah, so we have 2 different types of sharpeners. Yeah, and also with knives, we obviously do not put them in the dishwasher, and you want to wash them right away and not let them kind of like sit in any juices or anything, and also dry them right away because they will start pitting or get rusty. So I will wash this right away when we're done. But I'll grab another knife and I can demonstrate this knife sharpener that we use. I don't really know what the right like length of time, like how often you should be sharpening your knives. I think I just kind of do it when I'm bored and it's nearby.
You should be able to cut a tomato without any resistance.
Okay, so a good rule of thumb is seeing how well you can cut a slice of tomato, how easily.
A soft fruit.
Yeah, so that way you can really check the sharpness of it. I know there's probably some other more dangerous ways to check the sharpness of it that I've heard about, but I will grab another knife and show this one maybe a little closer. Let me check here. Yeah, and I just want to thank these other 2 community fellows for being here to help me. It's a lot more to juggle than I thought it was. So they're a great help. So just kind of run it in between the 2 kind of discs, yeah. And that kind of like the pressure between them, I guess, will help sharpen it. The friction, yes, those are the words I'm looking for. And so this is the one that we have just always out, but I think that also depending on what kind of knives you have, it's good to look that up, or like the website, we can also tell you. I know with Cutco knives, you can actually send them back and they will sharpen them for free. I know a few other probably knife brands probably do something really similar, or might be a place you can take them.
Yeah, and like if you have a stick, you want to do it more at like a 45-degree flatter angle.
Yes. Check on the grapefruits again, I guess.
They're super close.
Okay. I'm so impatient. They're going to be so good. They really, I mean, it's so simple. It's just a fruit with some added sugar. You don't even have to add the sugar. I mean, I don't think they're bitter. So I love how sweet they naturally are, but this is a great, just like quick little dessert when you want that sweet treat after dinner or any meal or even breakfast. can do it whenever.
Someone had asked earlier about the recipes and if you'll be sending those out.
Yes, so I will be sending out a follow-up email tomorrow that will contain a link to our YouTube channel, which will have the whole workshop posted on it, and in that email I'll be sending the recipes that I kind of base these off of. Again, I kind of went a little off recipe with some of them, but that's just because I like to cook that way. I just like to kind of reference different recipes, but I did use kind of specific recipes that I followed, so I will be sending those out. And if I also find, I'm always kind of on the lookout for other recipes, so if I find any that, utilizes these wonderful winter crops, then I will send some of those along as well. I think we might just take them out.
They're really close.
But I'll show you guys what they're looking like now, and that they probably need to be just a little more caramelization. But
Oh, they look pretty.
oh, they look good.
And they'll continue.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Set these down. Yeah, and they'll kind of continue to cook a little bit and get more brown. Can you see it well? Okay,
yeah.
Awesome. Yes, you can see it's starting to get a little bit of that caramelization. And as it cools, it'll kind of get like hardened. I need to make sure I don't touch it now because I know it will burn me. I definitely think I tried it earlier without the butter, and I think the butter definitely helped with the browning. I found one recipe from New York Times, and it said to use like a tablespoon of brown sugar, and I definitely used less than that, but really just depending on how sweet you want it or just how much of that caramelization effect you want. And I didn't cut this one because I wanted to see if the little sections will still be easy to get out, but I always think it's easier once you like take the time to cut through around the membrane, and it'll be much easier. But I think that, is there any last minute questions? Yeah, well, I think that brings us to time then. Yeah, I just want to thank everyone for joining us. And if there's any further questions, please email us again. I'll be sending out that follow-up email. So you can just, I'll have my email in there. The email will be generated through Eventbrite, but so don't just reply to that. You can, but I'll still see it, but I'll also have my personal work email in there that you can send any questions or any suggestions for future workshops that you might want to see us do. We'd love to hear your feedback. And also just, stay caught up on our website and our social media pages, and you can see future events. We'll be probably doing about like 2 workshops a month, and other community fellows will also be kind of doing leading their own workshops. So it'll be a fun way to get to see all the cool things that we're into, and we'll do a lot of fun things. And also check out our website for making any donations. They're super appreciated. They really help facilitate the fellowship and all the programs, all the community programs that we have. So always welcome. Also the fellowship that I'm in, this fellowship deadline is approaching pretty quickly on March 10th. So if you know anyone who's interested, check out our website and get more information. And we hope to see you at more future workshops. Thank you.